You're dead.
You're dead.
The 10 teraflop barrier for enthusiast gaming. We crushed the
Okay, all right.
The 10 teraflop barrier for enthusiast gaming. We crushed the competition.
This video is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly, whose thermal paste we used to paint the words "Build Me" on the side of the H500P, and whose owner said that it was the best use case of the thermal paste that he's ever seen. You can find more about Thermal Grizzly and the Cryonaut paste, which we used, at the link in the description below. The compound we used has a high thermal conductivity for a paste, is non-conductive, and can be used as a substitute for a still high-performing compound if you don't want to go full liquid metal. Learn more at the link in the description below. This is our disappointment build. It costs $1,280. Wait, no, you still need the power supply, motherboard, RAM, storage, fire extinguisher, sprinkler system, OSHA inspectors, electricians for 30 amp outlets and breakers, carbon monoxide detectors, and hearing protection, but you do save on your home heating system in the winter. So why are they here today? Why have they returned? Well, short of being possessed briefly and being forced to wear this shirt, I also thought that it would be kind of fun to put Vega Frontier Edition, a 7740X, and the H500P all in one build and see if we could burn the place down before end of year. So the 7740X required some dusting off. After its tragic fall in the review, it did collect a bit of dust. Vega Frontier Edition needed a little bit of work as well, and the H500P we restored to its original configuration without the mesh mod, because Cooler Master never really liked when we said that we fixed it, specifically that word with the mesh mod, so we thought we would restore it back to the intended use with acrylic. And this then is the disappointment build. Just as a quick side note, no collateral damage is meant for the components that have nothing to do with the disappointment aspect. For example, the random power supply, motherboard, and RAM that we pulled, but the 3 core components are definitely on the disappointing side. So we thought we'd kind of go back through almost like a flashback episode and look at some of the reasons why those were disappointing when they came out, and hopefully we can avoid those types of products for 2018. And that's unlikely, but we can at least set a baseline for what to expect next year. That way we aren't too disappointed with the launches coming out hereafter. So what we're going to do is go through each of the 3 core disappointing components one at a time, remind ourselves and everyone else why they were disappointing, and then we'll look at some quick numbers that were run on this system as a whole, because it did in fact complete its test without melting completely, asterisk. But we'll start with Vega Frontier Edition because it's been out of the light for the longest amount of time. It feels like forever since we bought this card and spent basically a month testing it, just like we did with the Titan V. So Vega Frontier Edition, if you missed it, like we did, it's been rebranded actually. It originally shipped something like $1,000 or $1,200, somewhere in that range, and now it's about $800 regularly. It's not a sale, that's just the new price. And it is also the Blockchain Pioneers card. So this card, Vega Frontier Edition, which spent the beginning of its life being touted as a creator's card, a productivity card, it's not for gaming card, even though it's not all that different from Vega 64, which arguably is for gaming. It spent the beginning of its life focusing on those productivity endeavors and creativity and all these rendering and 3D animation and all that software. Well, now it's been rebranded to the Blockchain Pioneers card, to the point that the site actually lists, quote, unleashing the power of Vega to crunch blockchain algorithms at striking hash rates. Perhaps AMD got duped by the same rumor we were duped by when we thought it would have 70 megahash per second rates. That, in fact, turned out to be untrue, and one would assume that AMD might know better by now that that was untrue, but it's got striking hash rates, so we can start there at least. And Blockchain Pioneering is now listed so high up on the strengths of the card on its own marketing page that it's above production, the thing that the card was released for and the thing that everyone touted the most when it came out. I now fully understand why AMD didn't allow media to take photos during the press event, the briefing where the card was unveiled along with its RX Vega brethren. It's because they spent an hour or more, actually let's just be fair and call it 8 because it was an entire day, telling us that the card was specifically being kept out of the hands of minors. This is something that AMD told all media. It's going to gamers. We're going to get this into the hands of gamers by bundling it with game packs. You spend $100 more and you get 2 free games in exchange for that, and also a coupon code that's non-transferable and you have to use it at checkout. But anyway, the point is, they were keeping it in the hands of gamers. So we're going to keep this away from minors. And then, sort of like some sort of addiction, they pretend that gamers are the core focus and then light up at night, literally, because it's a really hot card. And that's where we are today, blockchain pioneering. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just the mixture of not even marketing, just language to media versus reality. It's okay to say, we're making this card, we're going to split target cryptocurrencies or blockchain and gaming 50-50. Okay, no big deal. Just do it and we're all cool. Or you say, we're not letting minors get a hold of this. Oh no, only gamers will get this card if they can find it and afford it. And yeah, also it's a blockchain pioneering card. So that's Vega. Just a quick throwback to remember how hot this card was. When we put it under liquid cooling, and this is the flashback part of the episode, we found, if I remember correctly, that we were able to reduce power leakage by about 30 watts by putting both the GPU and the HBM under liquid, which of course gave us more power available to the core. So we could overclock the core a whole lot higher. And of course it operated still cooler while also leaking less power, because just like with a CPU like this one, which we'll get to in a moment, the general reduction in power consumption is maybe about every 10 degrees Celsius on a CPU, you drop something like 4% of your power consumption through leakage. So we were able to fix some of that with our Vega Frontier Edition hybrid mod. That was a lot of fun to work on this year. And we later segued into the Vega 56 hybrid mod, where we were able to sort of hack the power play tables via registry and get its power consumption up to 406 watts, along with some additional changes. We later did a BIOS flash with 64 BIOS onto 56, and that got us up well past Frontier Edition and 64 stock. In fact, once you do the flash, going to be at parity or slightly better. And further than that, with 56 versus 64, you tend to overclock a bit higher on 56 because you've got fewer cores packed into that area, so the density is a bit lower. The sort of heat density, as it were, is going to be a bit lower, giving you more headroom for frequencies. But all of that is a side point because Frontier Edition is the one that was truly disappointing. It felt like a card that was released specifically to hit the first half 17 promise. In fact, not only was it not sampled to media, which is completely fine, media is not entitled to samples, we're happy to buy the products. I just spent $3,000 on Titan V for that reason, for the company, to test it and see what we could learn about it. But the point is, it wasn't sampled, it wasn't really promoted that heavily, and it shipped with very buggy, incomplete drivers, and the key features weren't even enabled, and still kind of don't really work that great. So, to quote Linus's recent video, it's early access hardware, which I think is a great thing to call Vega Frontier Edition. It was a, let's get this out the door to meet investor promises and make sure that they don't sue us. And that's what they did. Frontier Edition was shipped, and then you got 64 and 56 later, which are actually a bit better at a few of the tasks than Frontier Edition, provided that you don't need the extra 2 times the memory capacity. So that is Frontier Edition in a nutshell. That was basically our month working with it, wrapped up very quickly. What about the other disappointing components, though? There's also KB Lake X, which is so forgotten to history at this point that I had to look at the sheet to remember the name of it. The KB Lake X processor family is just fascinating to look at. It was almost universally hated. And you can't really, even the H500P wasn't universally hated. I mean, it's still got some subjective elements to it. You could like it for its looks or whatever. Vega Frontier Edition, although disliked, it wasn't just straight hated. That's what was special about KB Lake X. It was really despised by most of the consumers, the enthusiasts, and media didn't really like it. We don't make it a habit to hate things. It's not really the right way to feel about a product in general, although sometimes they do deserve it. But this one was just anomalous in almost every way. It's a different package size, it's a different socket type, but it's a 7700K refreshed. Sure, you can overclock it, get 1 to 200 megahertz higher. Okay, maybe that has some value. The engineering samples that weren't sold to end users had amazing IMCs to the point that you could hit much higher memory clocks on those than on most other processors on the market, and that has something to be said for it, although they were mostly engineering samples. But Intel's primary defense of the entire KB Lake X line, which for some inexplicable reason contained an i5 CPU, was it's an upgrade path. This is your gateway drug to X299. Isn't it great? You can spend $300 on a processor, $600 on a motherboard, and then in 4 months, you can spend $1,000 on a processor and upgrade it. Who doesn't want to do that? What a brilliant idea. So that is KB Lake X. That's the primary issue we had with that processor when it came out, and I think most other media did too. In fact, not only is it just a bad cost proposition, bad value proposition, it instills a level of confusion in the market that is just completely unnecessary. One good example would be this motherboard, which is sadly collateral damage in this build. I'm sorry, Asus, it had to be someone, and yours wasn't in a bench already. This motherboard has 8 memory slots on it. KB Lake X can use 4 of those. They're on the right side of KB Lake X, the CPU. The other 4 can't be used until you put in the upgrade X299 chip. Sorry, we can't call it X299 because KB Lake X is technically X299. A Skylake X chip. When you put one of those in, you can use the rest of them. This is just some extra confusion to the market where when you look outside of our circle, outside of the enthusiast space, a lot of buyers won't necessarily know that. And sure, you can read the manual, figure it out, but what if you wanted to use 8 DIMMs? Maybe that's the reason you got it. And then you bought the CPU because it's cheaper and you really just need memory capacity. But that's kind of resolved partially with language, with media, with things like that, with research. So that's not the only issue. The primary issue, I think, is that Intel launched... How many processors did Intel launch this year? Let's go through that. January. CES, January 2017. 1 year ago was KB Lake Non-X. That'd be the 7700K, the 7600K, 7500, 7350K, G4560, G4600, all of those processors. You get the idea. Kaby Lake came out in January. Then there was, let's see, we had Skylake X, we had Kaby Lake X, and we had Coffee Lake. So in 1 year, Intel shipped several processor lines that usurped one another. So the 7700K came out in January, and it was unexciting. Sure, it wasn't a big jump from the 6700K, and we didn't have the reference point of Ryzen yet, but it was a decent overclocker. It performed well in games. If you didn't already own a 6700K, sure, it might be worth buying. Shortly after that, you get the 7740X, which comes out slightly better than the 7700K minus the IGP. That was another weird decision on their part. And you put it in X299, and hey, you have a great motherboard that you can upgrade later, which you'll probably never do because by the time you upgrade, you might as well buy something else. After that, just months later, comes the 8700K, which you can buy a cheaper motherboard for. You get the processor for about the same price. It's actually better than the 7740X. It overclocks about the same, if not better. It has better thermal paste on it. It's got the HTC compound on it. So the point is, it might feel kind of bad to buy a 7740X. You get, at least with Kaby Lake, 9 months before Coffee Lake comes out, and it's still kind of a decent processor, but you didn't spend quite as much on it. So trade-offs there. The Kaby Lake X family, though, was just odd. And it felt like Intel was just trying to accelerate their launch schedule to a point of cramming everything into 1 year so that they can really push hard next year to challenge whatever comes out from AMD at that point. Then there was the whole 12K gaming thing, which we ran a separate content piece on. This pertained to Skylake X and Kaby Lake X. It was basically Intel saying you can have 3 4K monitors because 3 times 4K equals 12K. Obviously, everyone knows that. Maybe we can get some pixel counts on the screen to show that that was sarcasm. But the point is, Intel was big on this 12K gaming idea, which is of course very popular and everyone is getting into this year. So 12K gaming, as we found it, unsurprisingly, is primarily limited to your GPUs more than anything, if you can even afford 3 4K monitors and if you consider that 12K. They also said that Skylake X with the 7900X was better at VR gaming. It's the best. It's better than the 7700K, which is just objectively false unless you overclock it to a point of being better, as we proved in objective VR benchmarking with actual numbers. So Intel had its own share of marketing oddities this year, as did AMD. They all pretty much did. That's what companies do. But it's end of year, so we thought we'd recap some of them just for a bit of fun. Now, that's not to say these companies didn't launch good things. They all did, and they even had marketing that was also equally good, but it's good to look at the missteps to try and correct for them next time. And then we have this, the H500P, which I think we've kind of talked about enough at this point, so I don't know that it needs a revisit. But just for fun, I'll put a thermal chart on the screen where we ran tests on this specific build. We hadn't done that before, and it got pretty hot. Things throttled. The VRM was getting hot up to high 70s, 80s when it was starting the test, and then starts accelerating at that point towards throttle territory, but not quite at it. This VRM throttles at about 100 degrees Celsius from an external thermocouple measuring one of the chokes or the caps, whereas in reality, the internal temperature is probably throttling about 110 C is where this board sits. But that really wasn't the worst part. VRMs can take a lot of heat anyway. That's just SVID telling the VRM to throttle via the protocol from the CPU, and you can disable that and still have largely the same issues. But anyway, the point is that the video card was approaching 90 degrees Celsius, was throttling its clocks as a result, and then the CPU wasn't too happy either. It was sitting about 60 to 70 Celsius most of the time with a 360 millimeter cooler on it, albeit not one of the best ones. We were not really that impressed with this fractal cooler this year either. But that's the whole point of the disappointment build now, isn't it? So yeah, it gets a bit warm. 60s, 70s with a 360 rad, and some burn-in software burning on both the GPU and the CPU simultaneously. If you want more numbers on the H500P that are more properly laid out, and we have the methodology and consistent comparisons between everything else, check the reviews, because that's where you'll find it. This was just a quick ad hoc test to say, like, look, it's kind of fun to see how hot this computer gets because it's got some hot components in it. But the H500P has one primary potential savior, And that's that Cooler Master told us they are actually, and when I say told us, I mean one of their employees tweeted at us when we started talking about this case, that they are looking into a mesh front panel. So at least that's what it sounded like. So maybe there's something there. That would help a lot. But I think we've really said enough about the H500P. It's a little fresher in the mind, doesn't need as much of a revisit as the other two parts. If you want to see stuff about it, we have plenty of content on all of these. And again, this isn't to say these companies are bad, it's to say these products were in different ways disappointing. And hopefully everyone can sort of live with that, because we're not trying to say that Cooler Master or AMD or Intel only made bad things this year. We're just saying these three specifically all together make for a very fun build. In fact, it was so fun that just running thermal tests on it took me about an hour and a half to get set up because I had various issues with each of the components in the build. So it lived up to its name immediately and was genuinely disappointing. Even though it was really just supposed to be kind of a joke at the beginning, it took more time to troubleshoot and get everything working properly to a point that we were happy with it using the stress testing software we use to run the numbers. So that's it for this one. As always, you can help us out directly by buying our shirts or our mod mat on store.gamersnexus.net. Help us out via Patreon at patreon.com/gamersnexus. Subscribe for more. And of course, keep in mind that the 10 teraflop barrier to enthusiast gaming has finally been broken. We crushed the competition.
We crushed the competition.